first. If you don't stick with it in Iraq, if we take Mosul back and we don't have a residual force, Iraq will fall apart. If we don't have a follow-on force after we take Raqqa away from ISIL, it will fall apart.
So you want U.S. troops to stay there for 20, 30, 50 years?
I want U.S. troops to stay there as long as it's necessary to keep us safe.
And that could be a long, long time.
It will be a long time.
Senator, stand by. Let's talk a little bit more about Donald Trump's vision for America's national security. Joining us now, Republican Senator and former presidential candidate Lindsey Graham. He's a leading voice on military affairs, member of the Armed Services Committee, very critical over this past year and a half of Donald Trump on a whole range of issues. Senator, thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you.
So he gave a very detailed speech on national security. I assume you've gone through it. What did you think?
Some of it I like. The idea of rebuilding the military is a must. If sequestration goes back into effect next year, by 2021, we're going to have 420,000 people in the Army, 278 ships in the Navy, and the smallest Air Force in modern history. So Mr. Trump says we need 540,000 people in the Army, I think 350 ships in the Navy, 36 Marine battalions, and about 1,200 fighter planes. That is the right answer. Now, we got to pay for it, but I agree that we need to rebuild the military and set aside sequestration, but you also need to do more than that. The FBI is under sequestration, the CIA, the NSA, so these are national security components, Homeland Security. So not only do you need to replace sequestration for the Defense Department, you also need to do it for other agencies that are involved in the fight on the war on terror.
So it sounds as if you liked Trump's speech.
I like that part. Now, here's the part that I didn't like. He called Secretary Clinton trigger happy. I would say she's more naive than trigger happy. She was right to want to go into Libya to help the Libyan people depose Gaddafi, who was a very brutal man. The mistake the Obama administration made was not following up. In 2010, I wrote an op-ed piece with Senator McCain, Kirk, and Rubio saying that we need to help this new Libyan government. The Islamists got 10% of the vote after Gaddafi fell. The Libyan people are not radical people, but the vacuum created by not following up after Gaddafi was deposed by his own people has led to a fractured Libya.
Do you believe the United States has not yet defeated ISIS because the U.S. does not have enough troops, not enough warplanes, not enough tanks, not enough equipment?
The reason we haven't defeated ISIL inside of Syria is that the ground component is not capable.
Which ground component?
The YPG Kurds. We're relying heavily on Kurdish fighters with some Arabs. The Kurdish fighters, who are the YPG Kurds, are a cousin of the PKK in Turkey. They'll never take Raqqa back from ISIL, which is an Arab town, and hold it. So our strategy to destroy ISIL with a ground component in Syria is fatally defective.
So the only way to do it is if the U.S. deploys thousands of troops. Is that what you favor?
The only way to do it is have Sunni Arabs, indigenous.
But they're not showing up, you know that.
Well, they're never going to show up unless you take Assad out. You're not going to have people in Syria fight ISIL alone because Assad has killed 400,000.
But so far, he's got the support of the Russians, the Iranians, Bashar al-Assad. For all practical purposes, how do you destroy ISIS in Raqqa, its capital, in Syria? How do you destroy ISIS in Mosul, the second largest city of Iraq? But it's going to take thousands of U.S. ground troops.
What did I say during the campaign? I finished in the top 17, so I don't know what you get for that. But the bottom line is, I said we need about 10,000 U.S. forces to help the Iraqi security forces to take land back from ISIL inside of Iraq.
They could do that in Mosul. It's been 2 years. They haven't done anything.
We have 7,500 people on the ground.
In Iraq?
Yes. I applaud the president for putting ground forces on the ground in Iraq that took Fallujah away and Ramadi. But Mosul is a town of almost 1 million people. We need more American troops to help the Iraqi security forces liberate Mosul. Inside of Syria is where it falls apart.
Mosul used to be a town of 2 million people,
That's exactly
the second
right.
largest city. So whose plan is better, based on everything you know, to destroy ISIS? Hillary Clinton's plan or Donald Trump's plan?
I like Hillary Clinton's idea of a safe haven inside of Syria. The thing I object to about Donald Trump, he says he wants to leave Assad in power. The one thing I want your viewers to know, from my point of view, you'll never end the war in Syria if you leave Assad in power. The Arabs in the region are not going to accept him as the leader of Syria because he's a puppet of Iran. The people of Syria, who've been brutalized by Assad, are not going to accept him as their leader. So, Mr. Trump, your view that you can solve the war in Syria and end it by leaving Assad in power, I think is fatally flawed.
In addition to being a politician, a member of the Senate, you're also in the U.S. Air Force. I think you're
just retired.
You're just retired, but you spent years and years in the U.S. Air Force.
Right.
As a Air Force officer.
I was a lawyer, so I don't want to oversell.
You were an officer. From your perspective, who would be a better commander-in-chief, Hillary Clinton or Donald Trump?
You know, I really don't know. All I can
You must have an idea.
Well, at the end of the day, if you're not worried about Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton being president of the United States, you're crazy. Look at both of them.
Well, who would be worse?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what Clinton would do about Assad. I don't know what. Let me tell you this. Here's why I think she's naive. She reset the button with Russia, not understanding what Russia was all about. She brags about an Iranian nuclear deal, not understanding what the Ayatollah is all about. He's a religious Nazi. So I think her judgment is very much flawed. And when it comes to understanding the Mideast, Donald Trump believes it is better for dictators to be in power rather than support people who want to have more social justice and have a more of a democratic life. I think Mr. Trump, quite frankly, doesn't understand that the young people of the Mideast are not going to live in dictatorships for our convenience anymore. And this idea of leaving Assad in power, leaving Gaddafi in power, Saddam Hussein in power, that model will not work.
He says the region was better off with those dictators.
Well, you go live there yourself.
Well, for example, Libya, he says, under Gaddafi it was bad, but look at Libya today with ISIS running big chunks of Libya.
Here's what he doesn't understand, and this is my problem with him. There's two things going on in the Mideast: a fight for the heart and soul of Islam between radicals and the vast majority of Muslims, and a desire by young people not to live in Gaddafi's Libya, Mubarak's Egypt, Saddam Hussein's Iraq. These uprisings in Syria came from the people, not from the Sunnis.
He said today that since 9/11, Sunday's the 15th anniversary of 9/11, the U.S. taxpayers have shelled out $6 trillion in military operations in Iraq, Afghanistan, elsewhere. He says $6 trillion, and look at the region right now. He says that money basically was a waste.
I will tell you this. If you disengage from the region, you'll have another 9/11. On September the 10th, 2001, we didn't have one soldier in Afghanistan, not one penny of aid going to the Taliban who ran Afghanistan, not an embassy. We were completely disengaged and we got attacked anyway. Here's my problem with Donald Trump. He doesn't understand that the way you win the war is you build up the lives of others, not just destroy terrorists. If you don't stick with it in Iraq, if we take Mosul back and we don't have a residual force, Iraq will fall apart. If we don't have a follow-on force after we take Raqqa away from ISIL, it will fall apart.
So you want U.S. troops to stay there for 20, 30, 50 years?
I want U.S. troops to stay there as long as it's necessary to keep us safe.
And that could be a long, long time.
It will be a long time.
Senator, stand by. We have much more to discuss, much more with Lindsey Graham right after this quick break. We're back with Republican Senator, former presidential candidate Lindsey Graham. We're talking about Donald Trump's vision for America's security and his attacks on Hillary Clinton. Senator, she has a new ad going after Donald Trump. I'm going to play a clip because it hits home very closely to you. Listen to this.
I know more about ISIS than the generals do.
John McCain, a war hero.
He's not a war hero.
He's a war hero.
He's a war hero because he was captured.
I like people that weren't captured, okay?
All right, John McCain is one of your best friends in the U.S. Senate. You hear Donald Trump saying that. Does he owe John McCain and other POWs an apology?
No, he endorsed Senator McCain. But what I like...
But does he owe him an apology for saying that?
He doesn't. I don't think John feels like he owes him an apology. I think he'd help himself if he apologized. I think it'd help Mr. Trump say, I believe that Barack Obama was born in Hawaii. He has a chance to make this really competitive. I think most Americans understand the difference between a grandmother who's here illegally and a drug dealer. If he would say, I see that difference too, it would help him on the immigration issue. When it comes to foreign policy, what President Obama has done is not working in the region. The answer is to put together coalitions in the region that are more effective than they are today. So as to Hillary Clinton, I think her big sin is not being trigger happy, but being naive, not really understanding what Russia was all about under Putin, what the Ayatollah really wants. The money we're giving him in sanctions relief is not building
Does Trump
hospitals.
owe the president an apology on the birther issue?
I think so. Let me tell you, I've had a lot of differences with Barack Obama. I think he's been weak, indecisive when it comes to foreign policy. I think he's misjudged the region horribly. I think he's presided over the dismantling of the military. But I don't dislike the man. I think he's a good man. He's been a good role model. I don't believe he's a Muslim, and I don't believe he was born in Kenya. And here's Mr. Trump's problem. If you hang on to these views and you can't say, that's not right, then people question your judgment. If you really do believe that this president was born in Kenya, then I'm not so sure I want you to be my president.
What would it take for you to vote for Donald Trump?
Well, he's doing much better. General Flynn is a great guy. The idea that he's going to have the generals come up with the plan to destroy ISIL rather than some secret plan of his own makes me feel a lot better. He's articulating rebuilding the military in a fashion that I agree with. He's talking about immigration more realistically, I think. So what would it take for Donald Trump to win this election? For people to believe he's got the judgment, the background, and experience and temperament to be president. They don't want to vote for Hillary Clinton unless Donald Trump makes them. And the way he would win this election, in my view, is to up his game when it comes to the issues about where President Obama was born. Realize we're not going to deport 11 million illegal immigrants, and we shouldn't try. A family here that's done nothing but violate the immigration law, that are good, decent people, is one situation. A criminal gang member is another.
And release his tax returns?
I think he should release his tax return. Every president since 1980 has done so. Why should we have an exception for Donald Trump? What is so unique about Donald Trump that he should not be required to release his tax returns? And if he did that, what Hillary Clinton's done with this email really is offensive to me. Everything she told the American people about the email situation is proven to be a lie.
Except the FBI director, James Comey, today wrote a letter to all the FBI employees saying he stands by his decision. It wasn't even a close call. It was the right decision not to recommend criminal charges against her.
I didn't say that I thought she should be prosecuted, even though I've got concerns about destruction of evidence, obstruction of justice, people under her charge destroying instruments, technology that may have relevant information to investigation. But she told us all that I've turned over all work-related emails and I never sent or received classified information. Either she didn't know what she was talking about or she tried to deceive us. That's where the public has flaws.
Did Comey make the right decision in the end to recommend against criminal charges?
All I can say is that it's perplexing to me that she's not being held more accountable. I can say this as a military member. If you did exactly what Hillary Clinton did regarding classified information, you would be at least reprimanded and most likely court-martialed.
Well, he did reprimand her. He said she was extremely careless and negligent.
I don't want to set a standard for the rest of the government and have a different standard for somebody who leads the government. Because I can tell you, if you're a rank-and-file member of our government, member of the military, the FBI, and you did this, you'd be in a world of hurt.
You were a lawyer in the U.S. Air Force. Talk to me a little bit about this latest incident, this Russian fighter jet for 20 minutes harassing a U.S. Navy plane in international airspace. Very, very dangerous, according to the Pentagon. What are the Russians up to right now?
I don't understand. What is the purpose here? Is it to just shove it in Obama's face to kind of... I don't know. I don't know what's the end game for Putin here. What does he achieve by this? Because something bad can happen, and I can tell you, if there's a conflict between Russia and the United States, we win. But it's a symptom of a greater problem. I think the red line being drawn by President Obama against Assad and not being enforced once Assad crossed it, he's using chemical weapons today, that Iran, Russia, and China see this president as weak, and it's a symptom of a greater problem.
Is the Senate and the House going to fund the money necessary to just deal with Zika in Florida right now, or are you going to hold that hostage?
If we don't, we're going to make a huge mistake.
Have a separate bill just to fund the battle against Zika.
Get it done. Get it done. And, we have differences with Democrats and Republicans, but get the money.
Are you ready to lead that charge?
I am ready to vote tomorrow for a standalone bill that just passes, sends the money, no strings attached. But what I'm asking Harry Reid and Mitch McConnell to do is have the FBI brief us about what the Russians may have done regarding our election. The plane incident is immature and dangerous, but if the Russian intelligence community has been using proxies to interfere with the democratic election of 2016 in the United States, if that is true, then Congress should wreak holy hell on the Russians. We should impose sanctions on this regime like you've never seen
You believe
before.
they're doing that?
I don't know. My suspicions are that they are doing it, but if they are, how does the Congress and this president not push back? It is mind-boggling to believe that Russian intelligence services are hacking into the Democratic National Committee and other instruments of politics and trying to affect our election by turning potentially
Or
this stuff.
supposedly they want Trump to be president.
Well, at the end of the day, every Republican should want the Russians to be punished for this. There is no short-term gain here for us as Republicans. If the Russians are manipulating and cyber-attacking the Democratic Party to create upheaval in our election, every Republican should stand with every Democrat to tell the Russians this is going to stop.
Lindsey Graham, thanks very much for joining
Thank
us.
you.
The senator from South Carolina.